Okay, so now let's take a look at how to actually generate video from Aphantasia. So we're going to use the same GitHub repo. It'll be EPS696 Aphantasia. And instead of opening this first collab notebook, we're going to scroll down a little bit further, down to where we see IllusTrip. So we're going to open this collab notebook. So this one, what it will do is we'll be able to pass in either multiple content strings or multiple style strings. And then from there, we'll be able to generate a video by essentially we'll sort of generate the first image based on the first piece of text, and then we'll interpolate from that piece of text to the next piece of text. So we'll go ahead and open this up. And I just want to make sure I'm in the right account here for me. All right, so honestly, this is fairly similar to the rest of, or the previous tool we looked at. I probably won't have a whole lot of updates or things to go through, except the process of actually uploading the individual sentences or the individual style lines. So we'll take a look at that. There are some slight differences in the way that things work, but for the most part, it's pretty one-to-one. Before I start, so I'm actually going to hit General Setup just to get us going here. And before I start, I should mention I probably won't be generating any videos for this particular demo, just because generating video does take a little bit of time. If you're doing a short video, like say 30 seconds, using one of the methods, it'll take, on a good GPU, maybe 20 minutes. On a bad GPU, probably like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So I would recommend that if you are with a K80, again, you will have resolution issues or sample issues, but you should also consider, again, if you like this, start with a really short sample, like maybe 2 phrases, and just sort of see what happens there. And then if you like it, this is probably the tool where you might want to upgrade to Collab Pro, which is $10 a month. That's not no money, but it's fairly small for what you get in return. So just keep that in mind. While this is still running, I also want to point out I've uploaded a couple samples of video being able to be generated from this to my YouTube page. I'll probably upload a couple more in the next day or two. So the way to find those, if you just go to my main page, which is, you can just go to the YouTube channel, click the little search icon here. I don't know why YouTube search is kind of messy, but if you go to the search icon here, not the one up here, down here, and you type in selfie song and hit return, you'll see there are a couple different examples here. And I've started documenting sort of what each of these, the settings for each of these is. I'll talk about them a little bit toward the end of this video. What I'll do is I'll just go and play a couple of them and talk about what's different between each of them. But I'll upload a couple more here as well so you can see. And then in the notes, I will also include just a couple things about how this is made. So if we go here and we look at this particular example, so this version uses multiple content inputs. So this will be, we'll do lots of different strings of text, and it's paired with a diverse set of style prompts. So I'll show you the example for this in just a minute. But just be aware that this particular one is sort of the kitchen sink example. So I'll have a couple more up here on this page when you want to take a look. Actually, maybe I'll just grab this URL and post this in our document as well. So let's see if we are finished running with the general setup over here. We are. So I'm running on a V100, which means I'm going to be pretty peppy, which is good. But again, I probably won't actually generate any video for this material just because it will take a little bit of time, and I want to make sure I get this tutorial out before waiting on more and more video files. All right, so the big difference here is that previously we just had we had a string input that we could take in and put in content, right? Now there's also this checkbox, this upload text, and what we're going to want to use for this demo is actually we're going to use this checkbox. So the first demo I'm going to show you is just how to upload a single text file for the content, and then what we'll use for style is we will use we'll use a single style. So what I'll do is, let's say, high quality image of a park featured on ArtStation. And I should probably spell ArtStation correctly. I doubt capitalization matters, but maybe it does very slightly. So again, this is one of the hacks that I showed previously, right? So if you remember going through there was there was an ArtStation hack that gave us a little bit of glowing, edgy kind of things. So I'm also going to pass in just I want a bunch of park images. And then what we'll try to do is we'll take sort of the text strings that we upload, and it will then be able to sort of, combine those two in this case. So we'll skip the upload styles check button, although I will show you what that looks like in just a minute. Since all of our text will be in English, we will skip the translate, and we're not resuming because we're not picking up from anything. So let's take a look at how to generate a text file first. So what you're going to upload here is you're going to upload a .txt file. If you're on a Mac, probably the easiest way to do that is just open up TextEdit and just create a new file. And as you type, you'll put each sentence on each line. The trick here is that to save these out as a .txt file versus a .rft file is you're going to go up to the menu. I realize it's cut off here. Sorry about that. So you go to Format, and then you go to Make Plain Text. And that will convert everything to this file. And then what you can do is just hit Command S. And then you can save it as a .txt file. So that's just how you save out the file. That's what we want to upload. We want to make sure it's in a .txt format. So let me show you what I've done for this file. So for this example, I want to do just something really short. So this is where you might want to take the text you generate in GPT-J or GPT-3, and you're going to put each sentence on a new line. So basically, you can have as much as you want on each line. Just make sure that you put the next sentence on each line. So what this is going to do, this is a Walt Whitman couple verses or a couple phrases from a Walt Whitman verse. So you will just put each one of these on their own lines, right? So make sure that, I believe you can also do this. You can add space between it. What I think will happen is this will be removed in the training process or in the generation process. But you want to make sure that you don't have this, right? So the way this is going to be interpreted, this is going to be interpreted as one content line. So make sure that these are broken up onto their own phrases. Cool. So save this out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to upload this when we run this cell. So we will run this cell. So run the load input cell. What happened here? Oh, because I didn't check this box. So make sure you check upload texts. Run it again. And then hit choose file. And I'm actually going to use this copy just because I have another Colab notebook running a generation, so I want to make sure I don't overwrite my previous file. So just upload your TXT file, hit open, and it should quickly upload. Next step is, this is optional for you, but especially if you're running something that has multiple phrases, I probably recommend doing this. Sync to your Google Drive. That way what's going to happen here is all of your files will be saved there, so should something happen, like your internet connection drops, I don't know, something else happens, you can then resume from this function if you want to. Let's go ahead and quickly connect. Cool. So next is, these settings are pretty similar to what we saw before. So we can set the size. I would say, again, especially if you're on a K80, think about using a smaller size, maybe 720 by 480. This will generate a little bit faster. Steps are how many, let's see, what did it say here? Steps define the length of the animation. So this will actually define how many frames you generate for the video. One thing to note is that with this library, it renders at 30 frames per second. So you want to make sure you do that math. So if you want a 10-second animation, I believe this will be set to, well, sorry, actually, so the way this works is this is how many steps per how many lines of text you have. So because I have 3 steps, there will be, if I set this to 100, it'll be 100 times the 3 pieces of text. So it'll be 300 frames, which equal 10 seconds. So that's important to know. Frame step is, let's see, sets frequency that changes the animation. So this will also add in an animation between the frames. So basically what will happen is we'll generate a frame. There'll be a little bit of like this ambient, I think sort of like a little bit of a zoom in, and then we'll do another bunch of frames to actually do interpolations between things. So I'm guessing, I'd have to do the math here, and then maybe render out a video to make sure, but I think what would happen then is you add this plus this times how many frames you have. So this will actually be 100, 200, times however many lines of text we have, so that's 300, or sorry, that's 3. So 200 times 3 is 600. So that means we will have a 20-second video. I believe that's how that works. Maybe you can generate a frame and double check me here. But I think I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So then you will take we've got a method here. So I think I mentioned this previously, but there are two main methods. There's RGB and FFT. Both the repo and my own sort of generation says to do RGB. FFT might get you slightly better quality on certain things, but it takes way longer. Like an RGB video on a V100 probably takes about, for this, it would probably take about 20 minutes. I found FFT to be like 10x that, so it takes a lot longer. So I would probably recommend leaving it at RGB. And then for our model, we talked about this briefly, but there's a bunch of different models. Pretty much everyone I know says to stay with 32. Maybe go to 16 if you want to, but I would just say use 32. All right, so let's run this cell. And I'll say like maybe toward the end of, if you play with this enough and you want to begin maybe experimenting, maybe then you want to switch to these different models. All right, so this is going to load in our clip model. So while that loads in, let's take a look at the other settings we have. Okay, so I think we've seen some of these cells before, but I think it's just helpful to look at them one more time. This one actually might be new. So this is a style power. So remember that we have both a content image and a style image, and we're kind of merging the two. So this will determine how much power or influence the style text has. So if you don't want any influence, which it wouldn't really make sense to do that, you could set it to 0. I believe 1 is just sort of even, and then if you really want the style to take over, you could do 2. So we'll leave it at 1. That's what the default is. Overscan, I think we looked at this before. Apparently this has to do with how the sort of frames overlap and work, and it's sort of recommended you leave it at Overscan. So let's do that. Interpolate topics. So if we look at our text frame here, we will see that we've got these 3 sentences. Now, one thing you might want to do is when it picks up and moves to the next sentence, you want it to immediately change. But what this interpolate topics will do is it'll actually sort of interpolate between these 3 methods or three sentences. So get like a little bit more of an even flow as it changes between those. This is one of those things I recommend maybe during 2 examples, one with it on and one with it off, and see what you think about both of them. It's kind of up to you. It's like there's a little bit of a flicker or like just a quick fix if you leave the interpolation off that I actually kind of like, but it's kind of up to you. So we'll leave it on for this. Looks are for color, contrast, sharpness. So this is sort of the effect of the images. One thing I should mention is colors. This is for saturation. So set to 2, and that gives you like these sort of like very bright, sort of more psychedelic colors. If you want something maybe a little bit more natural, you could try setting it to 1 and see what that does. Contrast will obviously contrast the images a little bit, and sharpness, it might be a good idea if you find that your images are coming out a little blurry, you might want to add a little bit of this, so maybe 0.2 or 0.3. So training, so samples. So I looked up between videos to see what samples is. So samples are, they take little crops of these images, and that's what it sort of helps to do more of the scoring between the images and clip. One thing to note is samples is the most sort of GPU dependent. So if you have a K80 and you're finding that you keep getting out of memory errors and even setting the resolution to be a really small size is causing an issue, try dropping this. Maybe try setting it to 100. The downside of this is that the lower this number is, the less quality your images are going to be. So again, this might be a good example that if you're liking this method, but you're feeling like your images aren't looking that nice, you might want to buy Collab Pro and then be able to crank up your samples. So leave it at 200, which is what the default is. Save step and learning rate. So save step is how often it's going to save one of these frames. And then learning rate, which was much lower in Aphantasia. I have just barely sort of played with these, but per the notebook or per the repo, this can actually be a very wide range of like 0.05 all the way up to 10. The default is 1. I've just left it at that, and I've gotten pretty good results, so I'll leave it at that. Augmentation tricks, so we talked about this before. Adding noise, macro might give you better sort of centralized images. And there's 2 here that are called enforce and expand, which I've yet to really explore too much on, but as I understand it, this should help increase diversity and quality. I haven't really played with these too much. I've gotten good samples before without even setting these, so could probably leave it before. Similarity function, I believe, is tied to how these work. So again, I haven't really played with this, so I set this as just whatever the default was. Okay, and then we've got the motion aspect. So I mentioned in here that there's sort of this nice little like zooming effect and that sort of thing through the motion. There's a couple things to know about these pieces. So one is zoom is obviously going to zoom into the image. It's literally going to take every frame, it'll like zoom in a little bit. So you want to set this pretty low because if you set it really high, you'll get a very psychedelic sort of like, I don't know, like Star Wars sort of like light trail. Star Wars, I guess Star Trek, right? That's the one with the light trails. If you set this really high, you'll get some fun, trippy stuff, but the images might not be that clear. Shift is sort of a left to right shift. Rotate is how much rotation do you add during that. And then distort is actually sort of like a warping effect. It's a little bit like, imagine like the top right corner moves away from you and the bottom left corner moves towards you, and you get sort of that tilt shift kind of thing. I've had good examples. If you want something really subtle and just sort of nice and basic with a little bit of zoom, but mostly keeping the images coherent, setting these both to 0 will give you a little bit of a nice, just sort of like slight sort of like shift in, zoom in, a little bit of panning, that sort of thing. But you can play with these effects and get different results out. Lastly, do you want to animate these effects? I think you almost always do. I've yet to generate a video with these off to see what that looks like. I can imagine it's more like it's probably more just like almost like cutscenes, which maybe that's cool actually. I don't know. Smooth. So the thing to know about smooth is it doesn't work for RGB, so it doesn't matter what you set it for. If you are using FFT, which was that other method that I mentioned up here, then I believe smooth will generally make your images a little bit blurry, but leaving it off will make your images more noisy, so you kind of got to decide what you want to do. I should mention I have an FFT version running over here to see what it looks like. So this is FFT, I believe, with zoom with smooth off. Make sure that's true. Yeah, with smooth off. So it actually looks pretty decent, but you can see like there's some areas that are blurry. I imagine that if I turn smoothing on, maybe everything will look blurry. But yeah, I'm just running out an FFT, so I'll upload this one later. I just want to see how different it was, but it is very, very slow. For a 720 by 480 with 600 frames, it will take 4 hours. A RGB version seems to take about 20 minutes, so definitely if you want to do FFT, you can, but just know it's going to take you forever to render that sample out. Okay, so back to our example here. So we've added in all of these effects, so we'll go ahead and just run this cell. Wow, that loading clip thing is still running. Okay. All right, well, apparently that finished. So now we've run this cell, and now we are, so before I hit generate here, there's one last thing, which is you can add 3D depth to your images. I think I mentioned this to a couple of you that joined my co-working session. You can add a depth of field, or it's not really depth of field. It's basically it's a machine learning model that can create depth masks from the images you provide. So basically, what it'll do is it'll render out an image, and then it will sort of zoom into that image, and you'll see a little bit of a stretch, sort of a factor. Like you'll see the things looking like it's not real 3D. It's more like a faux 3D effect. Actually, the very first video, the video that I showed at the very beginning of the first part of this lecture, uses that depth effect. So you might have seen, like, at the very beginning, there's those faces, those heads, and, like, as it sort of zooms in, you can sort of see the sides of those heads, and it almost looks 3D. So that's what this does. You can decide if you want to turn it on or off. The strength determines how strong of an effect that is. By default, it's set to 0.01. Maybe crank that up and see what happens. Maybe don't. And there's like a mask blurring, which I would imagine is just sort of like, as it generates these pieces of masking shapes or of the 3D shapes, this determines how sort of smooth those are. I've left these two at just the default when I generated that first video. So you go ahead and do that. The one note I should say is that this does add a ton of time to your render. It looks like it's about 3x time. So what I might recommend is first render out your video, see if you like the other effects, and then add depth last. One other thing to note is if you just want to turn this off, one thing that's happened is I've run this by accident and then I didn't know how to turn it off. If you set this to 0, that'll just turn it off. So you can set it to 0, run the cell again, and then it's turned off. So I'm going to skip this step just because I don't really want renders to take 3x more time. And then we'll just hit generate. And I'll let this run for the first couple frames, and we just sort of look and see what happens. And so you'll see again, just like Aphantasia, it starts with noise, and then it generates, from that noise, it starts to generate these images. So you'll see here, beneath it is the text that we're rendering. So I celebrate myself and sing myself, and it is a high quality image of a park featured on ArtStation. So for whatever reason, this particular example tends to generate these like more map-like, I don't know, almost like, I want to describe it as like Richard Scarry, but I don't know, it's like probably not. But more of like these sort of like park, like full park scenes. So just be aware of that. But you'll see it's rendering fairly quickly. It says to render this entire video is going to take about 7 minutes, maybe, like we're sort of a little bit under 7 minutes. So this is very fast, especially compared to the FFT model. So just be aware of that. That's probably why I would recommend most of us use the RGB method. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little bit of a zoom in. Like each frame that's being generated has a little bit of zoom in it. And again, that's a bit to create some of this more psychedelic effect, as well as to just sort of like, I don't know, give the videos a little bit more nice sort of flavor to them. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video. I will mention this particular example I've already uploaded. So if you come back over here, I believe the very first version of this, if you want to take a look at this one, that's what this is. So this is just a couple pieces of text and then generating the same style technique to it. Okay, so let's come back here. So I want to show the next example is if I want to generate styles. So let's say, you know, what this is going to do is it's going to generate just a single park scene, and it's going to sort of interpolate between those different pieces of text. And in my case, my text is a little bit abstract, so it's kind of, I don't know, it's not as clear what's going to happen here. If you had very clear text, like I'll say when it gets to atoms, you do actually see the atoms of like, you know, almost like DNA or like some other like 3D rendering sort of begin to appear. But some of these other things are a little bit abstract and the model doesn't really do a lot. It tends to be more park scene. But if you have more sort of direct text, you might get some interesting results by sort of blending the two with both style and this. But let's say that what we want to do is we want to take our phrase, so we're going to upload that same content phrase, but let's say we actually want to interpolate between different styles. So again, right now we're just doing a park, but what if each of my other styles was doing something else? So let's just remove the style here, and we'll set the upload styles to be a text file. So just like before, we're going to create a text file, and the way this will work is we're going to go here. Where did my text file go? So we're going to generate a style file, and it's really important that you have an equal number of text and styles. So if I have 3 contents things, I need 3 different text styles. So generally what I do is I'll just like write underneath each one of these like what my style should be, and then I'll remove the text content. So let's see, I celebrate myself, so let's say maybe image of singer, and let's keep the same style, so featured on ArtStation HD. Okay, so then for the next one, and what I assume you shall assume, so let's maybe say image of woman in mirror, and then we'll just copy this text. And lastly, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you, let's do high quality image of atomic reaction. And we'll do feature on ArtStation. And then you want to remove all of your text, so you should have only 3 style lines. We'll go File, Duplicate. We'll go Save as short. Let's do dash style. Make sure that's saved out. Yep, short style. And we might need to add txt to the end just to be safe. Let's do that. Okay, so now we're going to come back up to our cell here, and we have to check the upload text and upload styles. So we'll run this. And we're going to upload our text file. So we'll upload the short copy.txt. And then it's going to ask us for a styles text file, so we'll upload this. And we want short-style. Okay, now with those loaded, we do want to make sure that we can skip the Google Drive cell because we've already attached Google Drive. Actually, sorry, you know what? You can't skip this. If you change your text file name, you want to make sure you run this again because this determines where your path is. So let's say you've rendered a video and then you want to change out the text styles. Make sure you run this cell again because this is going to make sure that you're not overwriting your previous video. So run this. My file happens to be named the same thing, so it's fine that I'm not, let's see, overwriting my old files, but that just exists here. Once that runs, I'm fairly certain you can skip these 2 steps if you haven't changed anything, but probably to be safe, let's just run them again. So we'll run our main settings, and then we'll run our other settings again. Cool. And then again, we'll skip 3D and we'll go right to generate. So let's generate our video. And now what you'll see here is as these render, you will see, oh, interesting. Why does that change to 300? It was 600 before, right? That might be a bug in the system. Okay, well, we can keep an eye on that and see how this is rendering. So you'll see how we're now getting our singer? Like, it's kind of interesting. We're getting clearly a woman singing with a microphone. And then, again, remember how I mentioned with Aphantasia, there was that no text feature? That feature doesn't exist in this notebook. It probably should, because I noticed that quite often you get singer added back into these things. So just be aware that you might get some text in here. Maybe that's kind of cool. I was thinking, like, when I was playing with this over the weekend, I was thinking that it was kind of like, Brackage writing text into his frames, or what video did you watch? The Sue Friedrich one, where she was sort of like scratching in the different pieces of text. So maybe it kind of has that effect. But if you do want to try to remove this and you can't seem to remove the text from here, let me know, and maybe I can edit this notebook to add that feature back in. Another thing is, like, I sort of love these weird patterns. I don't know where that's coming from. But anyway, we are generating this. Maybe it's actually generating from something like, I don't know. I'm not going to guess too much. So this is generating our frames. So let's actually see what happens when we hit 100. Because that's when we should see a switch. Yeah, and so you'll see it'll now spit out, the reference text is different. And now we get a different image, and we should begin to see this person almost, maybe they're morphing into like a mirror. I can almost kind of see like a mirrored image here. It's interesting how not very strong it is. Okay, well, maybe I'll say this one out when this is finished rendering. So you can check, so the example for this, if you're interested, is the version 2. So this is, what I did is I changed the dimensions for this video, so it's actually vertical, because I want to upload it to Instagram. So you can change the dimensions and it still works and fine everything. This is also, I believe, like a 2.5 minute long video because it's all 12 phrases from this first stanza from this Walt Whitman piece. But what you'll see is I used ArtStation HD for all these. So actually, let me pull up the file for this. See if I can find it in my messy file system here. Let's see what's on my desktop. This is exactly how you should not be. Don't be this person. Okay, so Whitman style. So this was the text file that I uploaded. So there were, I think, something like 12 phrases in this particular one. And you'll see here that what I did is I did, self-portrait of a man, image of a man in the mirror, atomic chain reaction, but all of these use featured on ArtStation. And the reason for that is that you kind of want, well, like maybe one way I was thinking about this is because this is one video, I wanted all of the sort of style hacks to feel the same, right? I want all that same glow effect that comes from ArtStation versus other things. So you'll see I played with a bunch of these. I played with sort of adding high quality versus not. I don't know that it had a huge influence, but just, getting various pieces of this were pretty interesting. So if you watch this alongside that video, you will probably actually see the different sort of scenes sort of generate from each of these. The last thing I should mention is the last video, the third video here, this one, I mentioned uses a diverse set of text, and that's because let's leave this one open. And we'll compare these two. So this was the first one the second video. And then what I did for the third video is this. So I used a bunch of those hacks that you saw in that Imager file. So instead of using all of them as featured on ArtStation, I used some of the other ones like 20 megapixel or bokeh or macro photography or pencil sketch, unsplash. So I used a bunch of different, this is like the kitchen sink version. So I just tried to see what this would look like. So you can maybe compare version 3 to version 2 and see what you think. I personally found that this didn't work as well, probably because there's just so many styles and you're trying to interpolate between all that just gets kind of messy. I'll also mention that this version, actually let's just open this one up and we can watch it. Oh man, the ads I get on this are the worst. Okay, so this uses that 3D effect as well. So you can kind of see, like, as it zooms in, you'll see that a little bit of the head starts to stretch and it almost feels like it's in a 3D space. But you can see again here that this is how this one particularly rendered. So we start with a self-portrait of a man, and now I believe we're into the mirror, which didn't really turn out particularly well. And now we're in the chain reaction. So you can see how this animates, and again, that sort of 3D effect, you can sort of kind of feel the depth of these things a little bit more in this example. Again, I would recommend just playing around, because if you use the RGB method, you've got the option, this is the pencil sketch one. So the pencil sketch was supposed to be black and white, and instead I still got a lot of color in it. So interesting, whatever. I recommend using the RGB method, lowering the resolution, and just generating a bunch of different videos and sort of seeing what happens and seeing what you get. One thing to mention is just like with Aphantasia, one of the challenges is that because there's a lot of randomness and a lot of noise in these things, you won't always get the same video twice. So you might dial in your results and be like, okay, I'm almost there, but I just want to tweak a thing, and then you'll get a very different video. So just be aware that like these are a little chaotic in the way that they work. There's probably ways to fix that if we were to dig into some of the details. But I would say, just take a look at that and sort of see what you play with and just generate a bunch of stuff. And I highly recommend that if you make something cool or if you find a trick that works really well, please share it on the Slack channel and then other people can check it out. So let's see, anything else I want to cover? So I would recommend checking out the other videos here, as I mentioned. You can kind of then begin to see the difference between, one that's really focused on just one feature. So let's actually open this so we can look at it real quick. So this is the park one. You'll see you get much more of this sort of like zoomed out park scene. And I probably couldn't tell you where stuff switches. I guess we're switching here because this looks like atomic reaction or something. So again, I definitely recommend just running these and seeing what happens and seeing how you feel about different results. It's fairly quick, right? 20 minutes. So, maybe spend a morning during a weekend or an evening during the week and just generate a bunch of video and just sort of see what you like the most. The nice part about this is you can generally walk away, and if you walk away from it, it'll still render, and you come back and you'll save out the video, and then you can upload it and do that. That actually reminds me of one last thing, which is I believe by default this doesn't render your videos, so you will have to go in and render the videos. So let's come back here. This is now finished. If you scroll down here, and I didn't see... So, okay, so actually what's happening here is it's generating the video after the fact. So what should happen is you should get a video and it should automatically download. If that doesn't happen, you can run this cell down here and it will automatically download. for you. So go ahead and make sure you do get a video. So I probably wouldn't walk away for too long. The nice thing is it sort of tells you how long you have to wait. So you can set a timer for yourself and then come back and make sure your video downloaded. If you don't set a timer for yourself and you walk away and you come back an hour later, your notebook might have disconnected by that time, in which case if you didn't download the file and you didn't save it to Google Drive, you might actually lose it. So just be careful about that. That's one of the dangers of using notebooks. So make sure you set like a little alarm on your phone or whatever to make sure you come back and check on it. Okay, so I think at this point we are all finished. So I hope you make something cool. Please drop a note in Slack if you run into any issues, if you find any cool hacks. And I will see you in a co-working session this week. Just as a reminder, we do not have class next week either. So you've got 2 weeks off to maybe start to think about ideas for what you want to show in the show and tell, as well as to start watching all of those longer videos for the last section of class. So with that, thanks for watching. Thanks for being flexible with my schedule. And I hope you make something cool with IllusTrip or Aphantasia.